Hello, welcome to HLA Live. HLA Live is our regular broadcast on the HLA YouTube channel as well as all the other social media channels. Each week we talk to interesting people from across the HLA community.
Good evening, everyone. I am really excited to be chairing tonight's meeting.
Hi, I'm Rosie Spooner and I'm hosting HLA Live this Wednesday.
And I'm an HLA scholar and I'm also going to be your host this evening.
To share with us their ideas and their innovations and hopefully bring them to a global audience.
Quite quick, we have ideas, let's do this, let's do that. So
many of the topics come from our community, with scholars and faculty expressing an interest in many of the discussions that we're about to have.
Hello everyone and welcome to the HLA Live session on widening participation in the postgraduate realm.
Homelessness and health.
Addiction and the new normal.
HLA programs are built on 6 pillars. The leader is an innovator and entrepreneur. The leader is a communicator. The leader is a manager. The leader as a negotiator. The leader as a follower. And the leader as a philosopher. If you are interested in becoming a HLA scholar, why not get in contact? Many of the episodes in HLA Live will cover one or more of these important pillars. The HLA team consists of Pedra, Eamon, Tim, Riddy, Alistair, Adil and Trisha, and a range of other HLA scholars and faculty.
Our upcoming speaker needs no introduction. Professor Dem Kumar from Kumar & Clark's Clinical Medicine will be discussing the changing role of the doctor and the lessons learned from yesteryears.
Thank you very much, Shami. Thank you for your kind introduction. And also can I thank the Healthcare Leadership Academy. I'm really delighted to be here today. And I look forward to talking to you. It's a shame I can't be there in present, but in real time. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about the changing role of the doctor because I think there's so many changes in our curriculum, in the world around us, and so on. So perhaps I could touch on one or two of those points as I go through. So let's start off with our changing world. Well, currently we are going through this awful pandemic, which sort of is going to go on, I think, for another year or two. And it's changed all our lives. And it's quite interesting that it takes a pandemic for us to actually change the way we work, to show how fantastic research is that within a few months, we've managed to produce a vaccine, which would have taken us years. Diseases are changing, and of course, therapies are changing with new monoclonal antibodies, new cytokines, all sorts of things, which are all expensive, but actually are effective. And the other thing is we really need to keep an eye on the world economics because we've got the major challenge of climate change and pollution. We've got migrations between countries and populations. That, of course, spreads diseases. We've got gender balances, and certainly in medicine now, there are more women, certainly in Britain, going into medicine than there were before. But females are incredibly important as the core of a family, particularly in lower middle income countries, and we've got changing demography. And the practice of medicine itself is changing in the way we do things and the way we now work in teams and the way that some nurses and pharmacists are taking over some of our roles, and our roles are changing as they go. So the question really is, what will the role of the doctor be in the future? So we have a changing profession. So if you look in the 18th and 19th centuries, the doctor used to go and visit the patient, and all he had there was, in fact, just feeling the pulse. But it was important he was there because the patients felt reassured. And likewise here, you've got a doctor here with the father looking very anxiously on at a girl who perhaps had pneumonia, and he was waiting for the crisis, which you remember is a time when the cells in the lungs that are sort of making you breathe with more difficulty suddenly lies, and suddenly the child can breathe easily. And this usually happens and you know that the patient's going to get better. But what the patients had there was the doctor, his compassion, his empathy, and his altruism. I'm saying his here because they used to be just men then. But of course now we have women as well, thank God. I shouldn't say that, should I really? But nowadays we have advanced technology, we've got artificial intelligence, and sometimes I think in this utilitarian world, I feel perhaps our eyes are being focused away from the patient onto the computer and onto technology. But I think with the patient involvement in decisions and so on, I hope that will be maintained. So let me take you back over 20 years. And there was an editorial in the Lancet by Sir Cyril Chandler. Now, what he said was medicine used to be simple, ineffective, and relatively safe. It is now complex, effective, but potentially dangerous. And the corollary of that, of course, is that doctors have a greater capacity to do good, but their capacity to do harm is greater than ever. And I think this is the area we're in now, and we've got to be extremely careful that we know what we're doing with the new medicines and technology that we have available. So if you look at the population health, the age is increasing. I'll come back to that in a minute. But so is the genetic profile. And this is, in the olden days, if you were in an area, we knew exactly what the profile was. But now with people moving around with travel and ethnic minorities and people from different areas coming, the genetic profile is going to change. And we're just currently we finished collecting the 100,000 genomes that are required for the 100,000 genome project. And really now delivering with proper treatments which are focused for the patient for that particular genetic problem. Lifestyle, and this is really our self-inflicted medicine that we have, or illness that we have, with alcohol misuse, too much smoking, eating too much, and not exercising enough. And these are things that we could so easily as doctors try and reverse, because it would improve the health of our patients. And remember, if the patient's going to live longer, we really want to do that. The environment is a major problem again. We've got air pollution, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I'll talk a little bit about the socioeconomic conditions. And of course, poverty is one of the things that really drags us all down. And particularly in wars, you may get a country that's doing very well. Along comes a war, and then we're back to where we started. And of course, the effectiveness of the health service depends on the country you are in, but also that also will have a major effect on the population health. So I said we talk about age, and these are the data from the UK. In 1996, there was 16% of patients were over 65. In 2040, which is not far away, a third of the population in England is going to be over 65. Well, that's fine, but remember, 55% of the budget will be spent on this over 65-year-olds. And healthcare spent on the elderly is 14 times that of the working population. And a lot of this is usually in the last few months of a patient's life, or when I say a patient, all of us lives, when really the medicine costs the most. And then looking at the world overall, what's happening? Well, first of all, we're getting fatter. And of course, that means we've got increased comorbidity and increased diabetes type 2. And I think somebody was doing the mathematics a year or two ago, saying that if the diabetes sort of almost epidemic increases with the obesity, it could actually sink the NHS with all its money. So it's going to be a major problem. And this is not just a problem for high-income countries, and some of the low-income countries as well. The patients are fat, but most of them obviously would be thin because of lack of nutrients. Antimicrobial resistance is creeping on us, up on us, but has already. Bacteria now are becoming resistant to all the drugs we know. And sadly, we've not had a new class of antibiotics for decades now. And we've got to be really careful, because if you don't really pursue this topic and let everybody know on how not to prescribe an antibiotic, we'll be back like the girl in the 18th century I was showing you, who would have pneumonia and would probably die because there wasn't an antibiotic that was suitable. Climate change, another major impact on the world. As the world gets hotter, diseases will either re-emerge or new diseases will happen, and we are getting more pandemics. And the displacement of refugees, with wars, you get the crisis and then the displacement. And this, as you know, and we all know the sad, tragic news that we often see about refugees trying to cross and drowning in the English in the Channel, and indeed all around the world, because it's not just for the UK. And then, of course, as I said, the diseases are changing and epidemics and pandemics are spreading. And I suspect we're going to get more. The last major one, the world one we had was in 1918 with the Spanish flu. We've had several H1N1 and H1N2 of influenza epidemics through the years. We've also had MERS and SARS, the Middle Eastern coronavirus and SARS. These two are coronaviruses. So they again are a bit of a problem. But somehow we managed to contain them for some reason, or we know some reasons, but we have not managed to contain this epidemic. And I think public health and infection control is going to become enormously important. So let's go back to medical school. So what do we learn? Well, we're all excited when we start off with medicine, but we try and sort of build up what you learn. So the basic sciences, which I think sometimes medical students find boring, in fact, they are really the building structure of where you're going to be building your clinical side. So it's very good to have a good dollop of basic sciences. And then, of course, you meet diseases and you look at the pathology and the combination, then you suddenly see how the sciences actually affect pathology, and suddenly it all makes it relevant. And then you've got to develop your clinical and your clinical skills, and you become a clinician. And often I tell the students and even doctors that if you get a patient, you can't diagnose them, go back and take the history again. And often the clue is within the history. And of course, nowadays you need to communicate with the patient. And remember, we're going to be meeting people from all around the world. So you need to have a knowledge of what other people, or their cultures are and so on, so be able to treat them. And eventually you get a sort of pattern recognition of a disease. So you can work out fairly quickly, adding all this up together, what the disease is. But in all this, I would suggest that you have a good dollop of research, because if you know, and if you can't do research, at least learn the research methodology and technology that will be able to actually analyze the data, the journals and everything that you read about the advances in science and in medicine. So you're now qualified and you've got a bit of a choice. Now, where should you go? You could become a clinician, and that's very important because that's actually deals with the patient. You can do teaching or become an educator, or you could be a research worker and just go up in academia and do research, whether in a lab or somewhere else. Or you could do a combination. You can become a clinician and spend time teaching. And let me tell you, you'll be teaching all the time anyway, because medical students and young doctors will be coming through your hands anyway. Or you could just take an educational disease and do just teaching. And likewise with research, you can do both. You can do clinical research, or you can do basic research, or you may say do 3 days clinical and do research in the other way. I've been extremely lucky in my life in that I started off with this, I did that, I combined those two, and then my eyes turned towards here because I had to give up my research lab because the textbook, which I started and just stopped editing recently, the 9th edition, in the 10th edition, 9th edition, but the 10th edition is out. My eyes sort of turned more towards this. But then apart from this, which is all sort of within the umbrella, what I really want you to do is to look outside, what's going on elsewhere. What about medical politics? If you're not there at the seat, you can't change what's happening to medicine and the way it's going. There are other committees you can make a huge effect. I know they're boring, but they have to be, you've got to be there to be able to change anything, because that's where the answers or the questions are answered. Innovation, there's so much innovation taking place in the medical field at the moment. And of course, you could in fact work on climate change, where of course we need quite a lot of help. But in all this, you're going to be a leader. And I'm going to come back to that leadership in a minute. So what career should you choose? Well, think, what would you like to do? What would you like to do? Not what other people like to do. Because you've got to be interested in it to be able to do it and do it well. So where and what specialty should you do? And I would say I said to myself, I want to look 10 years ahead and say, I'm a gastroenterologist. What are the gastroenterologists doing? Are they enjoying it? You know, are they loving doing their work, or what are they doing? And I thought that was great. And that's why I took up gastroenterology. But if you don't know what you want to do and you haven't found out your numbing, go and talk to a mentor and help talk it over with him or with her and see what you think would be the right thing for you. And then always remember, not only you've got to do your career, you've got to do other things. And of course, the family is your unit that will keep you alive, basically. So make sure that you do look after them, because that's important. But when should you have your child? And so it's all very difficult. Research, yes, I don't know about mastering, but we have obviously intercalated degrees. We can do either bachelor's or masters. And some of us, sorry, beg your pardon, I seem to have gone on without. And some of us go on to do PhDs. Some do PhDs and then MBBS, but most of us do it afterwards. And then remember, there's a huge, vast amount of experience you can get abroad and bring back, or perhaps take to your experiences here, because it's a two-way interchange. Or you may just want to do pharmaceutical industry. You might go into some other industry. You might just go into research and do industry. And it's quite interesting about most of the research in industry is done in universities. Because that's where, of course, the academic departments are. So a lot of juggling to do when you qualify. And this is the time when you think, gosh, do I really want to do this? So you arrive and you find you've got to do ward work. So you've got, I don't know how many, 10 to 30, 40 patients on your ward to look after. You've got to go out and do outpatients and then arrange the diagnostics and so on. But remember, one of the things that keeps us alive is really the teamwork. It's just lovely working with a team. So you're not alone. There's always somebody there you can ask for help if you need to. You'll be teaching your medical students all the way through your life. And you've got to remember, do your own continuing professional development to make sure you're all right, because you'll be appraised every year and you'll be revalidated every year in England. So in the UK, in fact. So I was revalidated a couple of years ago, so I've got another 3 years before my next one, if I go for it. But you've got to be doing this yearly. On the other hand, if you've got a team, you become a manager and you become a leader of that team. And on top of that all, you might be wanting to do research. So a lot to do, a huge balancing act. And at times you get a bit low. And I think if you get low, just take time out and have a little rest and think about it. But if somebody gets really, really low and gets depressed, please look out for them, because I think a third of the medical profession have been depressed because of the stress. And so often they take to alcohol or whatever. It's really hard. So look after for your fellow colleagues and make sure they're all right. And then, the question is, will digital help this huge workload that you've got? And it's developing interconnected systems. And if you wanted to go to the top of the report, review, which actually shows how you should deliver this. And really, to be doing this, of course, remember, you need to be trained in it. So that also needs to be added to your curriculum. So you can do telemedicine, web-based analyses. There's so many apps now and smart devices that you can use. You can have remote monitoring. You can monitor the insulin and the blood sugar in a child who's at school while you're at home, or the mother can. All these are that you can remotely monitor what's happening in nursing homes. And of course, now robots are delivering the sort of day-to-day dishing out of medicine and so on. They're being tested in areas. And then there's, of course, computational technologies. And a couple of my students looked around and said, look, there's something that's needed. We are spending so much, we're adding to the carbon footprints so much by pathology specimens going by car using petrol and gas and so on. And they've developed a drone. And the drone's now being piloted. These are, remember, third-year medical students. They're now growing up a bit more. And they're piloting this, and they've got money from NASA, from the NHS, from all over the place, from the EU as well, to develop these drones, which will take pathology specimens without actually adding to the carbon footprint. A fantastic idea. So if you have an idea, go with it. And so I said, why do research? Well, you've got an inquiring mind. You wouldn't be doing medicine otherwise. But what it does help you with is a rigorous analysis of the problems you're faced with. And the excitement, of course, as you're going into uncharted waters. And I was saying research is 98% dredge, but that 2% excitement keeps you going. And it certainly kept me going. So as I said, you can become, and in fact, we've got academic pathways now. So you'd be looked after in our medical schools here. There is somebody looking after the academic students who want to do academic. They then are asked for an academic foundation post and go on, become a clinical scientist, and then a fellow, and end up in academia as a professor. And what it does do is actually improve the quality of care to patients, because we'll be really looking at diseases looking forwards. And the other thing I found was exciting was international collaboration with friends. So, you make friends, you talk across things, you exchange samples, and it's just great fun to see what other people are doing. Right, so let me go on to climate change, because this is one of my hobbies, not hobbies, because each and every one of us have got to do something about climate change. All right, because, if you're in a room, turn off the lights, get the new bulbs so don't do so much electricity, but also don't, have too much warmth, and they last longer as well. But you can see how this will impact on health. So for example, here you've got a flood, which is really going across a lot of the area. And here, as you can imagine, the water system will actually mix with your sewage. So in fact, you'll be drinking water, which is now already polluted. And that's going to cause a huge number of waterborne diseases as we go through life. Fires, and we've got one raging in California, in Australia. There's one been going on in Siberia for years. Not only is it taking away all our oxygen by destroying these forests, it's all adding enormously to the pollution in areas. And as you can see here, a street here in a town which is totally polluted. And for example, Delhi or Indonesia, Kuala Lumpur, wherever you like, there is this huge haze of pollution hanging in the air. And I remember once landing in Kuala Lumpur to find, it was beautiful sunshine, and as I came through, we suddenly went into darkness. And it wasn't dark, it was the middle of the day, but the pollution was so bad because the farmers were burning their fields and their crops for the next year's, to plant the next year's crops, in fact. And this, of course, deforestation. And then you find animals haven't got their homes. They now wander into towns, and the mixture between man and the animal life gets closer, and you develop zoonoses, as we've been seeing with coronavirus. So this is not a myth. It is getting hotter, and those of you who think it's not getting hotter, please come and I'll kill you personally, because just look at this. So there's degrees in Fahrenheit on the left, and these are the years along the right. So here's 2020 here. And you can see we were bumbling around here, and a slight increase and then down again. But now suddenly there's an inexorable rise in temperature and going higher and higher and higher. And what we must do is try and stop it going higher and try and reach net zero by 2040. And I hope that all the countries are now going to comply with that. And certainly in London, in November this year, we've got COP26, where in Glasgow, where I hope we will be discussing this as well. And this is just to give you an example of what might happen. Now, this is obviously a map of the world, but this was a map modeling changes in cereal grain yields to 2050. But the red here means a percentage negative or lack of growth of cereals, whereas the green is positive. So as you can see, all the red places will have great problems. And as you can see, there are already countries that are very hot, already countries that are in the low income country range, and the lower and middle income, LMICs. So the hotter countries are going to get hotter, therefore their crops are going to fail. And there was a huge drought here as well, in Ethiopia, which we didn't pay any attention to, but there it was going on. But that means starvation. And it's said that, for example, in a country like India, a 1 degree rise in temperature will fail the crops, and there'll be a lack of 70 million tons of wheat. That, of course, is mammoth and will lead to starvation. So you've got to be extremely careful, try and reduce, keep to net zero. But on top of that, there's allied sort of things that go along with that. The flood and the storms and the fires, which I've just shown you, the droughts, which I've just shown you. But what I just want to say is that remember the communicable diseases we thought we were getting rid of by just good hygiene and so on, but they're going to come back again and they're going to rise. So a lot more infecting type of diseases. Your waterborne diseases are going to go up because the malaria and the dengue, the viruses will shorten their breeding period. They will produce more viruses, and therefore not viruses, the anopheles, the insects, anopheles, or all the others that are actually not waterborne, but actually have a part of their life cycle in the water, will actually increase. So we're going to have a major problem with that. And that may be so, but remember, we are short of doctors worldwide, and all the blue areas are where you've got less than 30,000 doctors per 10 million people. And as you can see, yet again, it's the low middle income countries who are going to get hotter as well. So let's go back to leadership, because that's what you all are going to be and you need to be. So what do you need? Well, you need to have honesty and integrity. You've got to be hardworking and selfless. You've got to have the ability to take people with you. Don't ever tell people to do something, but do it and show them how to do it. So there's nothing worse than, say, going on your electives, if you went to an elective to a low income country, saying, I'm going to do this. No, you go there and say, look, what would you like me to do? What would benefit you better? And if you do that, you take the people with you and you're more likely to achieve what you want to do. Also, look at the vision you have ahead of you, but tackle little minor problems as they come, and don't get off track by doing that. And lastly, just believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, you can't do anything. Now, these are just the editions of the book that I started. And the reason I'm putting up this for you is if something needs doing, just get on and do it. And when I was a student, I had really very poor textbooks. And I didn't learn anything, I have to say. They weren't exciting enough for me. And I thought, right, when I grow up, I'll write the definitive textbook. Well, it took me a long time to grow up, but eventually I did get off my bottom and start. And what I wanted it to be colorful, I wanted to have algorithms, I wanted to have tables, I want to have pictures. I'm a little girl, I like color and I like all these things. And I think it's amazing how it just took off. But having taken off, it was a huge responsibility, a massive responsibility. So if you think writing textbooks is easy, please think again, because it did affect my life, it affected my lifestyle. And I'm lucky that my family stayed with me, because I was working all the time, weekends, holidays, any breathing moment. And each edition, and these are the editions, each edition took 3 years. So we had 6 months off, and then we were collecting the data for the next one. And so it went on and on and on. And really now we've done 9 and 35 years of all this. It's such a relief that I've now handed over to the 10th edition and the 3 new editors who are writing that. But we also wrote other books for past ones. But I just want to point out this last one here, which is on global health. And the reason I want to point out to you is because I was sitting in the Royal Society of Medicine in the bar having a cup of tea, and there were all these lovely, bubbly medical students. And I said, I've got an idea. Why don't you write a book on global health? Because that's what they were talking about. And then I said, no, I've got a better idea. Why don't you write it? And in fact, they went off and with medicine, what's it called? I think you've changed your name. It was medicine, but it's now, anyway, it's Students for Global Health. That's it. That's what it is. 127 medical students from something like 30, 40, 50 countries wrote the book. And B. Setia, who was then became president after I president of the Royal Society of Medicine, we edited it. And it's £20. It's for everybody. And all the proceeds go to sending students on electives. So do try and get it. It covers a lot about what you should be doing in the low and middle income countries, about politics, about economics, about mental health, women, road traffic accidents, sustained living, obviously the MDGs and the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and really helps you understand the world as we live in. So we started off by saying, well, what is the future as a doctor? Well, the answer is, I'm sure you wanted an answer, but I haven't got one. And the reason I haven't got one is just look at the sort of things that are changing all at the same time. So you've got the effects of AI and modern technology, and we don't know what eventually the end product of that would be. How are we going to learn? Well, you know, if you're a cyborg, you can take a little chunk and put a few gigabytes worth of intelligence into your brain. You've got the net, but of course, I think with Google and so on, you may not get the right emphasis of disease and so on. We can produce stuff, and got 3D imprinting. The diseases are changing, and with the population demographics. We have healthcare professionals now who can do some of the roles that the doctors do. Genomics, which can give us now more focused, personal, targeted treatments. We can do virtual surgery with robots, and your hands are on the robot miles away doing the surgery for you. And we've got, and well, I think I've covered that. So really, the effects on society are going to be massive as to how we did it. Already, because of COVID, we're now doing 70% of our clinics online. But I always felt you still want to see them, you know, see how you get on. But in fact, it's all happening. It's very different, but it's very exciting. But also remember, there are clouds in the air, climate change. I just talked to you about that. The resistance I've talked to you about, population explosion. They're going to be getting on to 8 billion. There was 7.8 about 10 years ago, but it's going very rapidly. Starvation, we're going to get the pandemics, the obesity we talked about. And I don't know how somebody worked this out, but the medical knowledge will double every 23 days. Well, I don't know how they work it out, but the knowledge is massive. It's going very rapidly, and it's exciting, but I don't know where you're all going to be. But whatever you do, please keep these tenets forever with you. Remember your integrity, your compassion to patients, the altruism. You've got to continuously improve to provide excellent care for your patients. And remember, we're working in partnership with members of a wider healthcare team. So we're doing that. Don't be arrogant as doctors, because I can't stand arrogance. We're all in it together. So here are my messages to you about do's and don'ts. These are the do's. Lead by example. Work hard. Always keep the patients first. Look after the staff under you, because if you don't, then you won't have a happy team. The minute you arrive, you know, the first greeting in the morning, whoops, I keep messing around here. The first greeting in the morning, if you come in looking sullen and ghastly, the whole team will take on that effect. If you come in and say, hello, Shami, how are you? You know, it just brings up that thing. And we work so much better in teams. And if you have a difficult decision, be fair. However one might want to, you know, be beneficial to one or the other, but be fair. Encourage, teach, and help. Now, what you shouldn't do, don't ask anybody to do what you wouldn't do, all right? Don't be offended if somebody yells at you. It's their problem, it's not yours. So don't yell back, but try and understand why that other person is angry. You know, maybe they're worried, maybe, I don't know, they've got a problem, a financial problem, something. Try and be understandable and keep that mutual respect, or you've got to keep that respect. Avoid confrontation unless it's absolutely necessary. And I hate confrontation. I always find that if you mediate and you talk and you discuss something, you can actually get the right answer. And just don't complain, just get on with it. Okay, so in conclusion, Shami, I'm sure you're all dying to go. Don't waste time, all right? There's a lot to do. Choose your path in medicine carefully. And remember, you'll be a doctor for the world, not just for Maastricht, not just for the UK, not just for you know, wherever you are in the world, because you'll be moving around. And look outside medicine, have a hobby, have something that you can relax with. You play the piano or collect stamps or sing or, you know, just have a hobby. And look at other countries and other diseases and, you know, innovate, get ideas and exchange ideas between each other. Never lose your enthusiasm, because if you lose your enthusiasm, you've lost it, all right? Never lose your enthusiasm. Look after yourself. And as I said, please don't be arrogant. There's just no room for arrogance. We're all the same. Just respect each other. And above all, have fun. So thank you very much indeed. And I wish you all the very best in the future. And I'm looking forward to you being excellent doctors, because I'm getting old and I need you to help me. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone that made tonight's episode possible. Whenever our scholars are thinking about complex problems facing our health systems, we encourage them to think about how they make significant change in the world of healthcare. We are incredibly lucky to have some incredible scholars in the HLA. They use the HLA as a platform to take their ideas and bring them to fruition. If you are interested in the work of the HLA, why not join us at one of our future HLA events? Why not join one of our programs? Why not even become a HLA scholar? Thank you for joining us. My name is Johan Marlwaner, the director of the HLA, and it's a good night from all of us.